All right, hello and welcome to the Actual Tech Media Expert Series. Today's session, we will be talking from edge to cloud, how backup solutions are evolving. And this really is a fun conversation because the world of data protection is evolving, and that is happening fast. New opportunities, risks, solutions, and strategies are expanding, updating, and coming to market all the time. These approaches and technologies can help ensure that your data is protected and recoverable, but the solutions have to fit your needs and enable scalable growth for you. So it is more important than ever to stay up to date and in the know, which is why we are all here today. In this expert series, we will be chatting with an awesome and fascinating speaker who is here today to tell us all about what we need to know, give us all the info and the hottest trends, key tips, best practices, everything you need when it comes to choosing the right backup solution for you and for your organization. Now, I'm going to bring in our expert in just a moment, but I can already tell you that not only is she informative, she is a lot of fun, and this is going to be a great start to your Friday. So grab your favorite chair, get a cup of coffee, and let's dive in. All right, I'm going to give you a little bit of information that's going to help you get the most out of your day today. But before we jump into that, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Jess Steinbach, and if it wasn't clear already, I am thrilled to be with you on this lovely Friday morning or afternoon or wherever you're at in your day, and to be your moderator for this conversation here today. Now, again, as I said, just a few housekeeping things. This is going to help you get involved and engage with the conversation today. So I want to draw your attention over to the question section of your webinar console. Now, the expert series session is a great chance to chat directly with an expert. So make sure you get those questions in. Now, if we don't get to your question today in the live session, don't worry, we will follow up with you after we wrap, but we're going to try to get to as many of those questions as we can. Now, if you're in that questions box right now, this is a great time to say hi, to introduce yourself to the other members of the community here with us today. Share some of that Friday cheer with the rest of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, if any technical issues do come up today, maybe a slide doesn't advance, you have anything with audio or video, first try a quick browser refresh. That's going to do the trick most of the time, clears out most of those usual tech gremlins. But if they're really clinging on today, don't worry about that. Just shoot us a message there in the questions console, and the Actual Tech Media team will be there to help you out. Now, not only do we have some fascinating content ahead of us, we also have an exciting prize giveaway. So hang tight, hang with us, because at the end of our webinar today, we will be giving away a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky person here in the audience. You do need to be in live attendance in order to qualify. All winners need to meet Actual Tech Media's prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those are, no worries. We have the full T's and C's for you in the handouts tab. You just click in, scroll down to the bottom. And while you're in that handouts tab, I'm going to highly recommend that you spend a little time exploring. Click around, grab some of those resources there. You can read more about our sponsor, Rubrik, check out the Gorilla Guide Book Club, register for some future Actual Tech Media webinars. Lots of good stuff in that handouts tab. So click in and start exploring. All right, before we jump into our session, we're going to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor for this exciting expert series talk today. And that is probably a familiar face and name to most of you. This is Rubrik. A big thank you to Rubrik for bringing us all here today. I want to talk to you a little bit about them, even though I know a lot of you are probably already familiar with them in one way or another. But Rubrik believes that the next frontier in cybersecurity is data security. And as we said at the start here, it is more important than ever to keep your data secure, to monitor any risks to your organization's data, and of course, to quickly recover data. So enter the Rubrik Security Cloud, which is going to allow you to secure your data from insider threats or ransomware with air-gapped, immutable, and access-controlled backup. Now, if you're thinking about data observability with Rubrik, you can continuously monitor and remediate data risks, including ransomware-sensitive data exposure and indicators of compromise. And if data remediation is on your mind, Rubrik Security Cloud will enable you to surgically, I love that, surgically and rapidly, both very important things, recover your apps, files, or users while avoiding malware reinfection. So basically, all the important things. If you want to learn more about Rubrik and the Rubrik Secure Cloud right away, head on over to that handouts tab that we were just chatting about. Click on the Rubrik link, get that tab up and running, and you can spend some time exploring that page after we wrap. But for now, stay with us because I think, oh, yep, prize drawing. We already talked about that. You already know about that. That's coming. Because up next, we are going to bring out our expert speaker, And let's bring her on screen. Okay, this is Melissa Palmer, technology analyst, VMware certified design expert, guest speaker, and all around fascinating human. Melissa, thank you so much for being here with us, and welcome to the Expert Series.
Thank you so much for having me, Jess. I am really looking forward to our discussion today. And like Jess said, we want to keep this really interactive. So we're going to have a poll. I have a bunch of times I'm going to ask everybody some questions about their experiences because I want to make sure that we're really tailoring this to get everybody the information they need to make sure that they can stay up to date with how backup solutions are evolving. And they are evolving fast these days, that's for sure. So let's get started. Okay, from edge to cloud, how backup solutions are evolving. My name is Melissa Palmer. You might also know me as VMIS. You can find me blogging at vmis.net. I'm a VMware certified design expert. I actually am an independent consultant now, but previous to that, I was at Veeam Software for a number of years in the office of the CTO, doing a lot of backup type stuff, so I know a thing or two that. And I've also done a lot of infrastructure, and I've been on the customer side of very large VMware environments throughout my career. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the evolution of backup, and this is a really interesting discussion we're going to have. We're going to talk about today's trends in backup, and we're going to talk about how you can stay up to date on the best solutions out there to solve your business problems. Now let's talk about the evolution of backup. I don't know how many of you follow the VMware ecosystem here, but I believe yesterday or the day before was VMware's 25th birthday. And as we all know, VMware has revolutionized the data center over the last 25 years, which brings me to my first talking point. And I want to share a little story with you. I want to do a little time travel. Now, this is literally a 20-year-old picture of me that I found recently. And it was 20 years ago where I actually heard the term VMware for the first time. So I want to tell a story and talk about VMware backup and what it was like 20 years ago in the early days of VMware. So I worked in a very, very large environment. We had about 1,000 VMware hosts and 30,000 VMware guests. We had done this massive project where the whole goal of the project was to basically get everything into 2 global data centers that were located in the United States. Consolidate everything, build new data centers, state-of-the-art everything. It was amazing. Except when backups ran. Because at that time, we were putting agents inside of virtual machines because, everybody put a backup agent on their physical server back then. We were putting backup agents in our virtual machines, and our VMware environment was coming to a grinding, screeching halt when we ran backups. And the issue with that is because the United States data center served the whole world, it was always someone else's production time when it was backup time. So that was something that we quickly realized maybe hadn't been thought through all the way, and we had to go figure out how we would do things and how we would balance our VMware clusters to figure out how to deal with that at the time. Now, the real solution to that problem was to do backups differently. But again, this was 20 years ago, and a lot of backup companies were just starting to talk about VMware backups. If anybody remembers the 3 letters who's a VMware or a backup person, VCB, right? There weren't a lot of good solutions out there. So we were kind of pioneering things out there. And today it's completely different because I can take a VMware backup and my environment won't even notice. So the first question I have for the audience today is, how has data protection changed over the course of your career? Now, from going from watching my environment be crushed to be able to take non-disruptive VMware backups has been a huge, huge feat. We could do crazy things now like integrate with storage arrays, right? So one thing I used a lot of was NetApp storage when I was a VMware administrator. And that's how I ended up at NetApp for 5.5 years too, by the way. And we would actually take backups from our storage arrays. Like that was crazy. Just like within 5 years of we can't figure out our backups, let's let the storage array handle the backup for us. And we'll take snapshots and we'll do our backups from there. So that was just like a 5-year period where things changed so much. So let's see, do we have any good comments about how things have changed? We have lots of great hellos from all over the place. Hello, everybody. I hope everybody's having a great Friday so long.
Melissa, we got a comment about you have not aged a day, and I have to agree with that. I don't know how that photo is from 20 years ago. That is not okay. Whatever you're doing.
I wish I knew what I was doing so I could basically like sell it, but I don't know. And yeah, I haven't aged day. I look exactly the same, and it's kind of interesting.
We did get a comment back from Adam saying that he's seen more standardized expectations, things like the 3-2-1 rule.
That's a good one, right? And that's something that I feel like in the wild days of early VMware, especially, because that's kind of when I started my career, we didn't have that. And that's going to bring us to our next point, Adam. Actually, thank you very much. It's a really good segue. So let's talk about the evolution of backup, right? While the core of backup stays the same, technologies change over time. And another question for the crowd is, why do we back up anyway? Right? Why are we going through all this craziness of backing up? But the core of backup stays the same, right? We're backing up to meet business requirements, to meet recoverability requirements in a nutshell, but technologies change. We went from an agent on the VM to offloading backup to storage arrays. Now, if we look at things in the cloud, right, we can do backups from the cloud. And again, it's usually a situation where we're backing up storage instead of backing up the machine itself, especially with the change in application architectures, right? Think about things like Kubernetes and containers, right? We don't care about the VM or the container or the server itself anymore. They're stateless. They're designed to be spun up and come back up. And if one falls over, it doesn't matter. It's all about the data and the storage, right? Because data is always on storage at the end of the day. So why do we back up anyway? Usually, Dan, this is a great comment. The term immutable backup did not exist even 5 years ago. You are so right about that. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. It's different. The paradigm has shifted, and we're going to get into that in a couple minutes. But the whole thing we're doing, right? We're taking a copy of our data and we need it for later. Hasn't changed that much. Now we've gotten into mutability, 3-2-1 rules, things like that. But the core of what we do, okay, Laura, backup today due to inability to prevent ransomware. Yeah, that's another good one too. I got a slide on ransomware too. Don't worry, because backup and ransomware, right? They've become something that goes hand in hand. And it's kind of funny that I've seen a lot of, in my time working for a backup company, right? I saw a lot of people like not really worrying about backups for a while, and they didn't really need them, and it was cool. But then this whole ransomware thing started. So what do we do? Adam, another good comment. Storage is limited, so we need to make room for newer files, but there always seems to be a case where we have to grab something from way back, which is great when we have things like the cloud, right? And we have archive tiers of storage where we can send that really old data that we probably won't need. It's cheaper to store and all that good stuff, which is different than on-prem, right? Do you guys remember having massive storage arrays to just like sit there for years and years and years to hold our data? And we can kind of do a lot of different things with cloud technologies as well now. So why do we back up anyway? At the end of the day, we like to back up so we can recover. So if you like it, then you should have backed up and tested it, because I have a lot of people jumping in the comments talking about ransomware, right? We're talking about ransomware where we need to have a recovery event. So here's the next big evolution that I learned in my career about recovery. This was actually when I was working at NetApp, and I was designing a storage array that was going to be used as a backup repository, which is funny because like people don't even use storage arrays sometimes anymore, right? We can just go like right to the cloud or something. But anyway, I was designing a backup repository, and it was a storage array, and the customer kept telling me our backups have to finish in this amount of time. Our backups have to finish in this amount of time. And that's what I was like focused on. I was trying to do all this stuff, calculating, how much data, how to change it, whatever. And I ended up asking one of the consulting systems engineers who was a specialist in backup, like, can you kind of help me design this thing? He goes, well, what about recovery? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? What about recovery? I only have an 8-hour backup window I have to meet. And he goes, well, how long do they have to recover? I said, I don't know. They never said anything about recovery. They just want their backups to run in a certain amount of time. And that was a big lesson for me, because at the end of the day, we're backing up so we can recover later. And the design you put into place to back up in a certain amount of time might not be able to recover it to meet our recovery objectives. So when we're talking about backup, it's really important to put it in the context of business requirements and recovery, especially today with the rise of ransomware. We need to recover certain applications and certain amount of times for certain business reasons. Usually it's monetary, right? So we have tier 1 applications. They're very critical to either our business or us making revenue or our business to run, and we have to recover those very aggressively. Well, the way we need to recover will often define the way we back something up. For example, I I might be I see someone saying they have a lot of storage arrays on-prem. You know what storage arrays on-prem are really good for sometimes? Really fast backups. So you send your first copy of your backups to like a flash storage array, right? Keep 7 days of backups there maybe. So if you need to recover fast, your recovery is super, super fast. That's a drawback of doing something like recovering to the cloud, right? Or backing up to the cloud, right? The recovery time. How long is it going to take me to pull that data back down when I need it? So there's definitely something to be said for high-speed storage on site when you need to recover fast. Let me hop in here and check the comments real quick because we have lots of good ones. Ransomware and employees leaving and damaging files. That's a good one too, right? So it's not only about recovery, right? It's about ransomware recovery, and it's about recovery from malicious actors or somebody doing something silly, like I accidentally deleted the spreadsheet I needed and things like that. There's so many use cases for recovery out there. Okay, great question from Matt. Can Rubrik help us prioritize our most critical data to back up and restore first? Rubrik has a lot of really good intelligence based into it, but one thing to remember is we always have to kind of tie it back to our business requirements and our application owners. When we start talking about things like recovery and disaster recovery and things like that, it's kind of classifying our applications. But Rubrik does have some great AI technologies to kind of help you identify, hey, what's the data that's being the most accessed the most frequently? Because chances are that's data that you're really going to need to hone in on and be able to prioritize, right? The stuff that we're using all the time. That's usually a good indicator that it's important data. So if we like our data, then we should have backed it up and tested it, because if we're not testing our backups on a regular basis, do we know if we can actually recover or not? And at the end of the day, it's all about recovery. It's also about compliance. It's also about making sure that we're meeting our requirements and all kinds of things if we're being audited. But at the end of the day, it's about recovery. Now, I love this next slide. It's very simple, but we've had a lot of discussion about this already. The other R word, which is ransomware. So we've got recovery, and then we have ransomware recovery, which is different. And I can't remember who started earlier by mentioning the 3-2-1 rule. So basically we want 3 copies of our data, 2 different media, and 1 off-site. I would go a little further than that and say we want at least 1 copy that's going to be like air-gapped and immutable as well, just because when we are dealing with ransomware, we want to make sure that we have a copy that the hackers can't get to. If you've gone and looked at any playbooks that get leaked by these ransomware gangs, they literally have instructions on how to target the backup systems. Like, they will go for your backup systems and try to encrypt, delete, destroy to force you to pay the ransom, right? It's important to think like a threat actor here when it comes to ransomware. They want us to pay the ransom at the end of the day, and they're going to do everything they can to make that happen. Now, ransomware recovery is really interesting because we have to be super, super, super prepared. We have to be testing our backups after we back things up on a regular basis and testing under different scenarios. There is a huge VMware ransomware attack going on right now. Now, it's mostly ESXi hosts that are connected directly to the internet. So if we have a nice internal VMware deployment, which we all should, we're probably not impacted. But what if a threat actor does get in and targets our VMware environment? I have seen a lot of customers say, hey, guess what? I'm just going to recover in place in the event of a cyber event. But if I have no VMware environment to recover to, then I'd better be going to a service provider or a colo or even a public cloud to recover in case of ransomware. So ransomware kind of spins back up on its side because, like someone also mentioned, we didn't even care about immutability 5 years ago, right? We need multiple copies of our data in multiple places so that when ransomware does strike, we're able to recover wherever we need to, whenever we need to. And the way we back that data up, and more importantly, the storage we send it to, or the repository or wherever we're storing it, we send it to, is going to be a big player in our recovery time. So we want to make sure that we're using ultra fast storage for our shorter recovery time so we can recover faster. Cloud recovery, right? If we think of recovering from the cloud, wow, it's going to take a long time to pull that data back on-prem. But if we have a copy of our data in the cloud and our environment is crushed by ransomware, we can recover in the cloud, and we can do that fast because our data is already there. So that's when a lot of these multiple copies of data become even more super important. So let's I talk all about data center quite a lot because that's where I've spent the last 20 years, as we can see. But today's trends really kind of go down to data center, cloud, and we've kind of had this rise in edge, right? So it's kind of changed over time where we have all these different technologies, all these different places for data to be. And that causes some kind of, I don't want to say it causes problems, but it causes us to think differently and really take a different kind of look at our data protection strategy, right, Jess?
Yeah, and I want to ask you some questions, Melissa. And I know in just a second we're going to ask a question of the audience, but before we do, is there one of these trends that was either surprising or most interesting to you, or like what on this page gets you amped up?
I think edge probably right now, because there's so many different implications, and edge is like the cloud 10 years ago, right? When the cloud started 10 years ago, no one really knew what it was. It was kind of nebulous. Ha ha ha. The cloud was nebulous. Get it? Nebulous cloud. My joke of the day. And edge is kind of developing in that same way, where it's like, what do we mean when we say edge? And the answer is really different, but it comes back to protecting the data. And that's what's important at the end of the day. So I'm like kind of looking forward to the next evolution of all this stuff and seeing how this edge stuff really shakes out.
All right. Well, I think that's a good transition to get into. So one of the things that Melissa and I wanted to do before she kind of really delves into exploring these trends and what we're going to see over the next year is to kind of chat with you guys about where you're at. So we have a question for you up on the screen, and we're wondering of those kind of areas, data center, cloud, edge, or maybe all, which of these areas are you struggling with the most? Which of these areas feels a little problematic or a little...
I'm curious to see what people are going to say.
Yeah, so far, and we're going to show you the results in just a second. So, and don't worry, you won't see anyone's names, so you're not giving away, like, you're not throwing your company under the bus if you say you're struggling with all of them. But we're gonna click through to that in a minute. Melissa, is there something that, as people are kind of considering which one of these is the biggest struggle, that you want them to be thinking about?
Think about recovery, right? Because I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Maybe not even like what is the hardest to back up, but what is the hardest to recover?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Back up, like once we know kind of our recovery requirements, that we almost I'm full of silly puns today. We almost have to back into our backup once we know our recovery requirements. I don't know where I get these from. I would say they're dad jokes, but I'm not a dad. I'm a mom, and I don't know if mom jokes are a thing. So I don't know what to call these horrible jokes I'm making.
Should we go to the results?
Yeah, let's go to the results.
Take a look. All right, last chance to click. If you haven't clicked on the poll, do it now. Quick like a bunny. And results. Okay. So tell us. Is this what you expected?
Yeah, I expected cloud, because cloud is just one of those things that a lot of people have struggled with because they moved to the cloud and they didn't maybe plan everything out as quickly as they could. I've seen a lot of people have to do these like data center evacuation projects where basically like people are like, oh, okay, well, we just need to close this data center by the end of the year, move everything to the cloud. And that's like the business driver, close data center. So something that's important to remember when you move to the cloud, I'll try to stay off the cloud soapbox, is it's just someone else's data center, right? So like you don't get a free pass on good design decisions or good architecture decisions. You still need to do all that. It's a shared responsibility model, not a no responsibility model. Why you don't have to worry about like hardware or cooling or any of that data center-y stuff. You do still need to worry about your data and your applications. So cloud is an interesting area for sure when it comes to backup and even recovery, right? Data center and edge, pretty even, all of the above, okay? And other, please explain in the chats. Oh dear, I don't know what edge is. Don't worry, we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great. I'm so glad you said that, Dora, and thank you. What Dora expressed is she's not totally sure she knows what the edge is, and if anyone out there
does anyone else, don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. Like, ask those questions, because when we don't ask, then we don't get answers. Then we all just kind of like Emperor's New Clothes it, where we're walking around going, yeah, the edge, yeah, super great edge, yeah, with no idea. So ask. That's great. All right. Well, Melissa, I'm going to let you keep rolling from here because we have things to chat about.
All right. So what we need to remember, and Dora, we're going to get to the edge on another slide. I have a whole slide for edge. Don't worry. What we really need to remember is that all data needs to be protected no matter where it is, right? So first, we're going to talk about a little bit of the data protection considerations and where sometimes struggle with all these different areas. And then we're going to transition into how do I kind of stay on top of all the different technologies and even pick a product that's going to help me with this, right? How do I pick the right way to back all this stuff up? So let's start with the data center common pitfalls, right? As much as I love the rise of virtualization, people go and deploy virtual machines kind of willy-nilly, right? So we have to make sure that we're actually protecting everything in our environment. Testing is really important, but the issue is we also need to have the infrastructure to test our backups, right? We need some place to test them. And then storing backups. We need storage to put these backups in, and that means we might need to have a storage growth plan for our backup repositories, or if we haven't projected or forecasted correctly, we could end up running out of space. So it's making sure that we're protecting all of our data, it's testing all the different types of recoveries, and storing the backups. And these are a little bit of kind of an oversimplification in some areas, but these are like some of the really common challenges that I still see over and over again. And then cloud, we're going to have to spend a little bit of time here. And I'm going to go back to my cloud kind of shared responsibility module, right? Protecting anything in the cloud. There's kind of this misnomer that when you go to the cloud, you don't need to worry about anything about, security or backup or anything. It's the cloud. It's magic. Remember, it's a shared responsibility model. You're still responsible for your applications and data. So you still need to protect them accordingly. The cloud is not going to do any of that for you, right? It's not going to do it. If you don't back anything up and everything blows up, you can't go to Amazon and be like, can you help me, right? Unless you're using a backup product that works for Amazon. And, there's cloud native backup problems and products, of course, and everything comes with its own challenges and all that kind of stuff. But the big thing that I see people struggle with is cloud management processes in general. Again, it can be so easy to go deploy something in the cloud that we're not making sure that we're backing up on a regular basis. So we almost need something to go in and look at our cloud and say, are you backing the stuff up again, right? That's really important. And then storage costs. Now, I had actually a really funny incident. Well, it wasn't funny at the time because I was on call for a really big VMware environment and nothing worked. There was a storage array that just had issues and it was a bug and it was a code and the vendor couldn't fix it. And this, I'm going to date myself again, but you guys already also saw the picture. The solution was to literally rush order an EMC Clarion at the time. That's how we fixed it. We went and bought a different storage array from a different vendor that didn't have that bug that they were hitting. So storage costs are something that kind of you're going to encounter on-prem and you're going to encounter in the cloud, but they're different, right? I don't have to worry about actually getting that storage array sent to me or shipped to me or racked and stacked or plugged in or anything when I go to cloud. What did someone say? Someone's got to back up all and protect all those delicious tasting gummy treats in the cloud. That is true, right? That's very true. How would you characterize, here's another good question. I'm just going to answer a few while we're here. How would you characterize latency as part of a cloud backup solution? Latency can be a huge problem, right? If we're talking about going from the cloud to on-prem, especially when we're doing restores and backups. So some people will actually just copy backups to the cloud instead of backing up cloud natively. Within the cloud, it's not such a big thing. But when we talk about edge in a couple of minutes, that's where latency is really going to come into play. And that's where we're going to have limiting factors. Because if we don't have a good connection, it becomes very difficult to actually send the data. And let's just see if we have any other quick questions in the comments before we go on. But we're going to talk about edge now because someone asked about edge. So let's go. All right, so how are we going to define the edge? Let's start with our purposes here today. When I say edge, I mean things that you are using that have data on them for your organization that are not in the cloud and they're not in the data center. I think the thought is that it's at the edge of the cloud or the edge of the data center, but I'm not talking about this, right? Like this is not what I'm talking about today. Because a lot of times people will say that your phones and everything else is an edge device. And that's just a whole nother can of worms that we're not going to open up. I'm talking about things that are outside of the data center for a business reason. One common example I've seen a lot of is like laboratory equipment or kind of if we're in a sales or retail organization, right? Things at different retail sites, right? It doesn't fit in the data center. It doesn't fit in the cloud. And how do we actually protect that? And then it's kind of like separating out. Are we protecting the device itself or are we protecting the data, right? Do I care about the laboratory instrument or do I care about the data it collects? So that's our first big decision point. Because in most cases, I probably don't actually care about the device, because these edge devices, I'll just go get another one. But I care about the data. So it's kind of saying, what data does this collect? How much does it collect? And how do I actually protect it to meet my recovery objectives and my business objectives? In many cases, you might not even necessarily recover the data to the device, because it might be sending the data back to either the cloud or your on-prem data center for processing, right? But it's just making sure I'm getting that data off of the device to some place where then I can then make another copy of it or use it or have it input into the system or whatever we're doing. So in the edge, the big thing is usually the bandwidth, right? It's bandwidth because we're in a little manufacturing facility, or we're in a retail facility, or we're someplace where we don't actually have a really good internet connection. So being able to time our backup so that we actually meet our recovery objectives can be kind of challenging there. It's really important to make sure that we have a handle on how much data we have and how much data we need to back up. But you know what? Nothing's really changed too much between the three of these, right? Whether we're talking about data center, whether we're talking about cloud, or we're talking about edge, the technology is the same, the concept is the same, and we just kind of have a different flair on everything. And whatever comes after edge and whatever comes next, it's going to be the same thing, right? It's going to be about protecting our data and making sure that we can recover it with whatever new constraints or requirements come into play. So that kind of brings us to where things break. So let's say I do actually need to protect any of these or all of these, and I'm looking for a new solution, or my solution isn't working. So where do things break? It breaks with whatever backup tool we're using sometimes, right? And this is going to kind of cascade through. If we didn't pick the right tool for the job, it's really hard to be successful. And we also need to have other processes in place throughout our organization to make sure our backups and restores are successful, right? We need to have an understanding of our applications and our data and the recovery objectives. So like RPO and RTO, if you haven't heard these terms before, RTO is the recovery time objective. How long does it take me to recover my data? And the recovery point objective is what point in time do I recover to, or basically how much data loss can I sustain? So those two values are really driving most of our decisions about backup and recovery. And they're coming from something called a business impact analysis. It's when the backup team and the infrastructure teams and the app teams and the business owners all get together and classify their applications, say, you know what, here's our RPO and here's our RTO, and here's how we're saying that we got to this number. It's because of a monetary value, or, in the case of healthcare, it's human life that's at stake, right? What are our business drivers and how do we come up with these numbers? And until people have done that, you can't guarantee that you're backing up everything. Okay, really interesting in the comments. Chick-fil-A has a very interesting edge solution built on Intel NUCs. Pretty interesting if anybody wants to Google that. I'm going to be Googling that later because I bet it is really interesting. That's a really good one. Thanks for sharing. And then, Dora, another question. How can we protect against cloud-based companies selling off our clients' data information to other companies? That's a really double-edged sword and kind of difficult to say. There are a lot of organizations that don't put their data in the cloud because of this reason, that they don't necessarily trust that Amazon isn't going to be able to read it or see it with all the machine learning out there. And there's other organizations that'll do something cloud adjacent, right? They'll kind of have their storage outside of the cloud, but use the cloud for things like compute and stuff like that. But there's really no guarantees. And I think if you go read some of the T's and C's for some of these cloud providers, they do some things where they can take some liberties with your data almost. But there really are no guarantees when it comes down to it, but it comes down to your business requirements again. So tools and processes, training, how we've given our staff ample training on the tools that we're going to use for backup. And then budget. What is our budget, and can we find a solution that meets it? And how do we balance the kind of conundrum of we need a solution to back up all of these different things and the budget we have? So how do we stay up to date on all this stuff? You're in a good place right now. Actual Tech Media puts on a ton of different webinars, especially in the data protection space, but in all areas that you need to stay up to date on. I personally like to read white papers. So I'll go look at a vendor and look at some of their white papers they have out there. I like to go to user groups, right? So go to user groups, see what everybody else is using. But probably my favorite is a live demo, right? If you contact any backup vendor worth their salt, they're going to be willing to give you a live demo of their solution and how it works. And anybody who doesn't do that, quite frankly, isn't worth your time. But it is important to kind of educate yourself and kind of what are the different solutions out there so that you can go ahead and try to pick the best solution for your environment, at least get started someplace. Sometimes you might want to kind of start with what you have in-house and see that, or you might be looking for another vendor because you are already having some kind of problem when it comes to backup and recovery.
Hey, Melissa, I'm breaking in because I wanted to ask you a quick follow-up, and I think you're gonna jump into some of these top features. This kind of I'm gonna two-parter you.
All right,
what
go for
I
it.
was going to ask you was, I think a lot of times one of the main questions that we get from folks in the audience is, hey, I'm out there, I'm shopping around, I'm looking for the right solution for me, and how do I start to evaluate? Because they can start to, sometimes they all look the same, or sometimes they look really different, and you can't tell which feature is the more important. So I think that's an element. But an interesting thing that Paul just asked triggered a question for me as well. And Paul was asking, he says, is the definition of the edge or edge computing continuing to evolve and redefine what it means to protect edge computing and decentralized infrastructure? And you just finished a slide talking about the importance of staying up to date. And I'm wondering, so yes, how do we look for the right solution? But also, as these terms are evolving and redefining, as the way we understand, we just got comfortable with cloud, and now there's super cloud. And is there, how we have to stay up to date in the theory as much as the solutions, or do you think we can focus a little more granularly, or do you want to give us any insight?
Yeah, I think it's tough, right? So when it comes to kind of how do I stay up to date on the definition of the edge, I'm going to give like a very, I don't know if people are going to agree with this answer or not, but I have just seen over and over in my career the trend of Gartner making the definitions at the end of the day, right? Mm-hmm. So if you look at any of the big analyst firms and what they're calling things, that's usually what sticks. And it does take a couple years for things to kind of flush out and for something to win. So I would say kind of follow the guidance from the big analyst firms and what the trends they're seeing. And a lot of times they come true. That's why they still exist after all these years, right? They're usually right. I think it was Gartner who first came up with like the cloud term and started defining the cloud. So I'm seeing the same thing for edge as well. And as far as kind of how to stay up to date and evaluate everything, it's a lot of it is just educational and kind of learning about what are the offerings out there. Like Actual Tech Media is a great resource. Google is a great resource, believe it or not, right? Go into Google, best cloud backup, best whatever, and then kind of take everything with a grain of salt that you read. Again, one thing I always like to do, and when I was a customer, I always wanted a demo from a vendor. And you can even go on YouTube these days and find lots of people go and make videos of all these different things for you to watch. But I like to talk to the vendor as well, so I can ask them the questions I have about my particular environment, because everybody's a little unique and not everything is going to work everywhere, right? Your solution might not be the same as someone else's, even if you're in a similar type of organization.
Perfect. Love that. All right. I'm going to let you take it away.
All right. So top features. What are the hottest features in some of today's backup products? And we had a couple things about immutability, right? So what is immutability? Let me define it first. It means that when we're talking in the context of backups, your backups cannot be modified or deleted. So hackers can't come in and delete them, and they can't encrypt them. That is probably one of the number one features you want to have right now, because we know that ransomware actors are working against this, right? They want to come in and get your environments. Immutability can be implemented a lot of different ways. I'm going to give kind of an overreaching, broader answer. Usually it is a function of the underlying storage that is being used for backup. So for example, like the S3 API, the Amazon S3 API is used by obviously Amazon S3, but a lot of different storage vendors as well. And there's an object lock feature within that API that actually provides immutability. So it's something that is built into basically the place that you are the place that you're storing your data. Cloud integration. So when we look at data center cloud edge, one of the things that I like to do is try to pick a solution that will work in all three places. So if I'm in the data center today and I'm looking to moving toward the cloud, can I use the same vendor? Can I use the same solution for cloud and on-prem stuff? Or to go a step further, Air gapped and immutable. Thank you, Bradford. Yes, we want it to be air gapped and immutable. So for cloud integration, I want to be able to maybe copy data to the cloud, to integrate with the cloud, to back up the cloud, or even to recover from the cloud on-prem. So I'm always looking for a vendor that can tell me that they can do multiple things, multiple places, right? Fast recovery, again, at the end of the day, it is so important to make sure that we can hit those recovery objectives, especially for those tier 1 apps that drive our businesses. So we want to make sure that we can recover fast with whatever solution that we're using. And then observability is a huge thing, right? We want to be able to see into our data and see what is going on. Not to go too much of a fangirl on any one vendor here, but this webinar is sponsored by Rubrik. And one thing that is very big for Rubrik is kind of the AI-ness and being able to look at your backups and try to detect when ransomware is in there before it activates, right? For Rubrik to be able to flag and say, okay, there's something going on here, you need to look at it. But it's really important, not only for ransomware for observability, right? But for forecasting and saying, hey, do we have enough capacity? Do we have enough runway? Do we need to change our backup strategy? Are we meeting our objectives? Is something wrong in our environment? Because when you think about it, your backup system is actually probably the most critical system in your environment, right? Because if you can't recover, you are out of business after a ransomware attack or a hardware failure or a site failure or the zombies ate my data center, right? So backup is a very, very critical part of every infrastructure. And I feel like a lot of times people tend to overlook it because, well, I might not need the backups, right? A lot of times organizations might not have put the investment they needed into because they could say, hey, you know what? The chances of me using this backup are so slim, I'm not going to worry about it. But guess what? In the rise of ransomware, yes, I absolutely need to worry about it because it's not if I get attacked by ransomware, it's when. So what to look for, and I think I touched on a little bit about this when you're choosing a data protection product, is a product suite, right? I want to choose a suite of products over point solutions when possible. I want my backups product to hopefully be able to back up all of my different environments and maybe do even more for me, maybe give me some advanced analytics on the state of my data, maybe help me with some PII type stuff and identification, right? So always look for something that has more than one feature, right? Backup and recovery is pretty stable stakes. I want to be able to go beyond this, especially in the age of ransomware and anything that has intelligence built in to help me with that. References. Whenever you're talking to a vendor, ask them for a reference. You want to talk to a similar organization that's using the product. You're not going to get a bad reference, right? If I go to a vendor and they give me a reference, it's going to be someone successful. But they might have gone through some pain points to get there that they're willing to share. So always ask for a reference of a company like yours that are using their product. Ease of management is so important. We don't want to have to worry about day-to-day operations and upgrades for the product we choose. We want it to be easy to use because, again, this is a world that's evolving so rapidly, and that ties into training and support. What is this vendor going to do for me after I buy this product? Are they going to enable me? Do they have a customer success department? How are they going to make sure that my staff is ready to go on this new product if we are bringing a new product in-house? And then again, support for multiple workloads. Hopefully we can find a good product that will meet our requirements that will support data center, cloud, edge, and whatever comes next, which we're not sure yet. We'll have to see. But I know that we're all in IT, and at the end of the day, it depends. So knowing that it depends, how do we make the best decision? We focus on our business requirements, right? That's going to drive every decision. We're always going to evaluate multiple products. It doesn't matter how good one product looks. You always need to evaluate multiple products, and because, you know, budget happens, whatever happens, and you need to be able to say, no, this is the product we need to use for these reasons. And I evaluated these other 5 products and here's why they won't work. It'll build you a stronger business case when you need that budget. And then document your findings. We hope that we make the right decision out of the gate, but let's face it, things change, things happen. So always when we kind of choose a product for something important like backup, document our findings and why we did it and keep a record of it. So if something doesn't go well down the line, we can say, well, you know what, at the time we made the best decision based on the data we had. Or conversely, if things do go really well, you can use that as ammunition for, hey, we need to tackle this other area of our infrastructure. And look how well we did with this backup project. We really nailed it. Let's go on to something else, right? So a couple of more things to think about, couple key takeaways. Things change, but they stay the same. But at the end of the day, we're always going to be protecting our data above all else. And that's the important thing to keep in mind. We're protecting our data. We need to stay up to date on the latest trends. There's a lot of ways to accomplish this. Our good friend Google coming to webinars like this, looking for different vendors and asking them to give you even just a product update, right? If it's a vendor that you haven't used in a while and you want an update, contact them. Again, any vendor who's not willing to talk to you about their product is not someone you probably want to do business with anyway. And then make and document our decisions. When we finally make our decisions, we want to make sure that we're making them based on business outcomes and we're documenting them for later, either for good or for bad, right? Because if something goes well, we want to be able to use that as a bar that we've set that we can go forward and do more. If things don't go well, we want to be able to recover from that as well. So again, data center, cloud, and edge, different technologies, different considerations, but with a little bit of thought and planning, and again, leveraging things like great webinars like this, talking to multiple vendors, we should be able to put ourselves in a better position where we can not only protect, but recover all of these different areas of our infrastructure and recover all of that data. Jess, did we have any final questions that came in?
Yeah, we do have one or two that I think we haven't gotten to yet. But before we do, I just want to make sure that everyone in the audience feels good about some of those key terms that we heard today. We've talked about immutability, we've talked about air gapping, we've talked about edge. If there's anything more, Melissa, that you want to dig in on any of those, or if anyone in the audience feels like they're unclear, now is the time. Speak up. We're good? We're feeling good?
I hope we're good.
Okay, I think we've covered it. Let us know if not in the comments there. Gilbert had asked a question about remote workers and how this might affect. So he says, with so many remote workers operating in home offices, how do you structure a backup solution that meets the majority of business needs while still remaining flexible and affordable?
That's a double-edged sword, and that's probably going to come back to the different products available out there. It can be done. It can be affordable. And a lot of it comes down to, the way different vendors choose to license things. It's definitely something that can be done, though. It should be, again, and you might need to switch backup vendors to make this happen, right? If the current person you're with says they can't handle the endpoints or the endpoints are too expensive, then it's time to start looking at other alternatives. But it can be done cost effectively.
I love that. And I do want to say, Brian chimed in to say, great, he's absolutely clear. John, not a question, but he wanted to say thank you, and we'll be following up with MSPs to ensure that his backups are valid. Sean says, great presentation, great information. There was one question that I think also snuck through, and I'm going to go back and find it. It was actually another one from Gilbert and I know what number it is, so I'm just finding it in my list.
You're good.
Okay. Can you talk about the relationship between backups and identities? For example, how do you make sure that you're only recovering or destroying what you should based on the actual identity?
That's great.
Request.
That's great. So that's going to kind of come back to all the way you're doing identity management and authentication in your environment, right? So depending on what tool you're using, there should be a mechanism that only the backup admin is allowed to go and do the restore activities. And in some cases, they can't actually look at the data. Right. So I might be the backup admin and I can go restore the data, but I can't look at it. So that's definitely a function of kind of the role-based access and identity management based in your backup platform. But that is something common. And that's a good thing to look for, right? Because if Melissa logged in at 4 a.m. and is restoring finance servers and then like going into VMware and doing funny things with them, that's a really good indicator that something is amiss and needs to be looked at, right? Because we see a lot of compromised credential type stuff out there in attacks. So that's when your backup product really needs to tie into more of a security incident and event management reporting platform. So it catches, hey, somebody's doing something they shouldn't, but your backup program isn't actually letting them actually get to the data, right?
Okay. A question here from Warren just came in. Would you assume that all vendors are PII data compliant, end-to-end encryption?
I would not, and I would point blank ask the vendors that and ask for their proof.
Good answer. Yeah. Okay, I like that. Satya, I'm wondering, what are the main issues with cloud for my EV battery data?
What kind of data?
EV battery data.
Oh, like for your car's battery?
I don't know.
Sure.
Satya, you want to give us a little clarity on that one? Let us know. Let us know if you want to clarify that one. You got a couple of more high fives and awesome webinar comments coming in too.
That was only awesome because I had so many great questions from the audience.
So many. Yes. This is really fun, folks. And I do want to say thank you to all of you for posting so many great comments and questions, because it really, I mean, we're so lucky to have an expert like Melissa here with us who can just live react to them. But it's been a lot of fun watching this come in. Well, I think we're getting close to the end of our questions, as well as close to the end of our time. So we will maybe need to wrap it there. But I think, Melissa, before you take off, if there was sort of one key thing, we covered a ton of information today.
Yeah, we did.
If you wanted everyone to walk away from this conversation and have like a mission forward, a next step or something that you think about, what would you want that to be?
Yeah, I would say, like, as you're evaluating your current data protection strategy and going forward, don't be afraid to ask the vendors the hard questions. And if you can't get the answer you need or that meets your requirements, that's a really good indicator that you need to be looking elsewhere. And again, document all those decisions and document the processes that you're going through to choose those new vendors and choose those new backup platforms, again, in case something goes wrong down the road, or if something goes right, you can use it to kind of maybe get new budget and make, as an example of showing results for some of your other kind of business-driven outcome events as well. So that's probably my big thing. Don't be afraid to ask those tough questions to those vendors. And if they can't answer them, go elsewhere.
Yeah, and a great case in point, asking questions in when you have opportunities like this, when you're participating or chatting with an expert, to not be afraid to ask both the hard questions and maybe something that you think is really basic and maybe you should know.
Absolutely. What do they say? The only like stupid question is the one you don't ask.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And I know in this world, sometimes we feel a little afraid to ask or, say an acronym wrong or something, and it can be scary. So just keep asking. And I want to say, Melissa, we got Brian, Eric, Juan, Peter, all chiming in to say, excellent. You rock in tech is Brian's comment.
Thank you.
Well, I think we'll leave it there, but, feel free if anyone else has any other questions. Melissa, how can they reach out to you, follow up, get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can connect to me on LinkedIn. You should be able to find me there pretty easy. Just type in Melissa Palmer. My blog is at vmiss.net. On Twitter, I am vmiss33. I'm happy to talk about any of these topics.
Well, Melissa, I can't thank you enough for being here. This has been just an absolute blast, and I hope we get to do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, and for those of you sticking around, I'm going to leave Melissa's key takeaways up on the screen here, and we're going to do a prize giveaway because I told you that we would be giving away one of those $300 Amazon gift cards, and I know you guys are all waiting. Although, hey, hopefully right now your mind is just as buzzy and full of cool things as mine is. I know that was just an excellent chat and such a great way to start out a Friday morning. All right, so I'm going to remind you one more time that you do need to be in attendance live here at the Expert Series in order to win. And our winner of a $300 Amazon gift card today is Deepak Karthikeyan from Connecticut. Congratulations to Deepak. We will follow up with you after we wrap. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to first thank Rubrik for making this webinar possible. A giant thank you to Melissa for a truly, truly engaging discussion today. And hey, sending high fives and special thank yous to all of you for attending and for making the decision to participate in this conversation today, for bringing all of your energy, your incredible questions, your comments. I know that a lot of us, feel a little time starved. We get to the end of the week and we just want to ride out the Friday or cram everything in so that we can get out to our weekend. So it really does mean a lot to us that you chose to spend time with us today, chatting and exploring and learning and connecting, getting to know each other and getting to know some of these ideas on webinars like this. So as you know, these Expert Series sessions are really fun to be a part of, not just because it's Friday and we're all excited to get on and about our day, but because they give us the opportunity to get to know some of these concepts together, to learn from each other, to connect and find out about some of these new innovative ideas together, especially with some solid expert guidance like we had today. So I know I've learned a ton from this discussion. I hope that you all have as well. I cannot wait to see you all at a webinar again soon. And until then, have an absolutely beautiful end to your day, end to your week, Super Bowl weekend, whatever you've got going on. And I hope I'll see you soon. Thanks all.